Funded by the German Research Foundation, Corpus Masoreticum is a long-term project set to run for 12 years. The Corpus Masoreticum project engages with the Western European Ashkenazi Masorah tradition between the 12th and 14th centuries. Using and further developing methods of digital humanities, Corpus Masoreticum uncovers forgotten cultures of knowledge and aims at shedding light on the cultural background of the Western European Masoretic traditions and text cultures. The text of the Hebrew Bible went through many stages of development, both oral and written. By the 8th century at the latest, various groups of Jewish Bible experts, the so-called Masoretes, engaged with all aspects of the biblical text in order to preserve it with the greatest care for future generations. Because Hebrew is a consonantal language, one of the things the Masoretes set out to do is to invent a system of signs for vocalization and accentuation. In fact, various groups invented several such systems. In this process, they had to make myriads of tiny but important decisions as to the precise spelling and pronunciation of the text. They did so with the greatest respect for the transmitted text. A primary technique was to annotate the Bible with an extensive and ever-expanding corpus of text-critical notes. This corpus of annotations is known today as the Masorah. Masorah, in Hebrew Masoret, refers to rules of orthography, syntax, vocalization, cantillation, and so on. Masoretic notes are rendered in the form of statistical notes with references to comparable biblical verses and were designed to ensure accuracy when transmitting and copying the text. Yet Masorah is much more than just footnotes to the biblical text. It conveys a whole system of medieval Jewish knowledge. Masorah first appeared in comprehensive form in the great medieval Oriental Bible codices, like the Codex Carensis, the Aleppo Codex, and the Leningrad Codex. Masorah comes in various formats. First, there is the Masorah Parva, or small Masorah. This is the heavily abbreviated Masorah, usually written on the right and left to the columns of the main biblical text. Then, there is the Masorah Magna, or large Masorah. It is usually found in the top and bottom margins of the Bible text. There is also the so-called Masorah Mitzarefet, the accumulative or collative Masorah, which at least in Oriental and Sephardi codices tends to occur at the end of the manuscript. The Masorah also arrived in medieval Ashkenaz, a region that is now Germany and northern France. Despite its fundamental uniformity, the Hebrew Bible text and its accompanying Masorah always retained regional variations, which are worth studying from a historical perspective. In Ashkenaz, Jewish scribes and Bible experts transmitted and further developed the Masorah as inherited indirectly from the Oriental codices. In fact, the only two manuscripts that are left of the medieval compilation of Masoretic lists, Sefer Ochla ve'Ochla, originate in Ashkenaz. In its first funding stage, Corpus Masoreticum focuses on lavishly calligraphic and highly decorated Ashkenazi Bibles from the 12th till the 14th centuries, and their text-critical reception by Ashkenazi scholars and halachic authorities. As such, it aims to uncover forgotten cultures of learning. From an art historical, but also manuscript technical and philological point of view, it is fascinating that the Masorah Magna in Ashkenazi Bibles is sometimes shaped in all kinds of fancy geometrical and figurative patterns and designs, and is often ameliorated with collative Masorah. This phenomenon is known as the Masorah figurata, not least due to the lack of philological research on this type of Masorah. There is a persistent preconception that its contents must be of negligible philological or historical interest. While some of the Masoretic designs have been studied in some depth by art historians, more often than not this has happened without consideration of the Masoretic text they consist of. In other words, very few scholars have bothered to decipher those tiny letters or to study them in any detail, let alone to put them in a wider cultural and intellectual context. Take, for example, the manuscript Oriental 2091 of the British Library. It is an Ashkenazi manuscript, most likely from the second half of the 13th century. Its peculiarity lies in its large-scale micrographic 2 to 3 part designs. In some cases, like on folio 203 recto, we could prove that the material of the list was used to attach a theological message, counter-crusade, to the figurative image. In other places, as it is the case in folio 335 verso, the beginning of Song of Songs, we find 14 Masora Parva entries, but instead of linear Masora Magna, the scribe put to parchment 3 Masora Figurata ensembles that consist of 8 Masoretic lists altogether. Of course, lists arranged in micrographic designs, like those found on folio 335 verso, are undoubtedly harder to copy than a table arranged in columns. Even finding the start of an Ochla-type list in a micrographic design can be quite difficult, while a column or table leads the reader or scribe fairly easily to its starting point at the top of the page, the title, or the initial lemma. This is not the case in our Masora Figurata illustrations. Our project, therefore, raises the question whether Masoretic list material in figurative forms was really meant to be copied within a Hebrew linguistic or grammatical scientific context. If it was not, then the question arises, what might have motivated the Masorete to arrange these lists in this way? The Corpus Masoreticum project aims to use advanced methods of digital humanities to show and analyze what kind of Masora and Bible text traditions are found on selected pages of Ashkenazi Bibles. For this purpose, Bimah 2.0 has been developed. It is a collaborative digital and open source work environment, database, and user interface. Bimah 2.0 allows editors to transcribe, translate, and analyze Masora in a workspace in which image and text are immediately visually linked by means of colored text paths directly drawn on the surface of the high-quality images of manuscript pages. Bimah 2.0 displays the manuscript via IIIF protocol. The digital side of our project forces us to rethink notions of what an edition should represent and what questions it should help answer. It compels us to describe our methodology and modes of observation with precision and to formalize them. To see how this works in practice, let us have a look at our database and its user interface, Bimah 2.0. It consists of 3 main elements. 1. The digital image of the folio on the left-hand side. 2. The different context boxes on the right-hand side for inserting and defining different textual and metatextual elements, such as the biblical text and its catchwords for the Masoretic notes, the various types of Masora, such as Masora Magna and Parva, and last, but certainly not least, the addition of the Masora itself with the help of SVG Unicode text paths that appear both graphically on the manuscripts and in the relevant context boxes, sometimes accompanied by its translation into English and a commentary on the Masoretic phenomenon. For the first time, diplomatic digital editions will not only provide the reader with the edited material in linear form, but also have the edition connected to its form and layout. The relationship between the micrographic image and its philological content becomes visible and interpretable. This will allow further research on the question of how knowledge was gathered and distributed, hidden and encoded. BIMA 2.0 is not restricted to the edition of Masoretic material or Masora Figurata. It provides a working platform for those texts and manuscripts and early prints that stand out due to their mise en page, such as glossed commentaries or Hebrew-French glossaries, known as Sifrei Pitronot. In this manner, BIMA 2.0 reunites various Jewish text cultures of Ashkenaz, like Bibles, commentaries and glossaries, that modern research tends to consider as individual items, but were meant to be part of an ensemble. By editing directly on the digitized manuscript surface, we are able to edit any kind of text diplomatically, and at the same time build a database that enables us to process a huge amount of textual data for further philological and exegetical research. The data of the edition will subsequently be processed and transferred into the so-called text as a graph data model using modern graph technologies. The representation as a graph visualizes the complex relations between edited lists and figurative Masoretic notes. It contextualizes the editions with the transmission of the biblical text and other important text witnesses, such as the Sefer Ochla ve'Ochla, exegetical commentaries from Rashi to Yaakov ben Asher, and Hebrew-French glossaries that contain more than 100,000 biblical lemata representing Ashkenazi text recensions. This mapping of lemata of the biblical text allows us to not only analyze relevant text clusters in detail, but also to apply various multidimensional research questions to the entire corpus and compare manuscripts as to their codicological and paleographical quality, and thus specify their geocultural background. In conclusion, BIMA 2.0 provides tools that guarantee the sustainable management, long-term archiving, preparation, presentation and visualization of the results of the Corpus Masoreticum and other related projects. As one of our first results, we can see that these Masora Figurata illustrations rebut the argument that the medieval scribes and Masoretes were merely artists and not philologists, and had therefore no idea of the Masora and its purpose. We anticipate that the Corpus Masoreticum project will shed new light on the European history of the Masoretic Bible and its interpretation, and give important scientific impulses not just to Jewish studies, but also to Jewish and Christian theology, as well as medieval art history and even Romance philology.